Howdy, everybody. How y'all doing?
Hey, pretty good. And you?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
And we are up on YouTube, so council members Del Chapo and Impel, just whenever you're ready to begin.
Pressure's on. So I think obviously we want to go through the ordinance that Chip has put together and any questions, comments, concerns to work through before we bring something before council. What council meeting would it be that we're thinking, Chip, that we would have something for? Would it be the next one?
Yeah, we're shooting for the 23rd, and if we need to get that back, we can. But Jennifer called, and we got that together to make sure it's on the agenda for the 23rd.
Okay.
Assuming we have a recommendation today. So.
Okay.
We put a placeholder on there under first readings, and it would just go out under separate cover based on the committee's recommendations.
Okay. So I appreciate that this doesn't go through maybe, like a list of offenses. Because then what happens if you fall outside of that? So I do like it being a little bit more general, and then perhaps over time, unfortunately, perhaps then some precedent starts to get set in how you handle various issues. So I'm just interested in what other folks' thoughts are on that. Or were you expecting more of, line item that would lay out expectations?
I'll express my opinions on this. I think I always try, just as everybody on this committee, try to conduct myself, professionally, show respect to others, work ethically. It's something that's important to me, even if I strongly disagree with somebody. I don't think I've probably swayed from that at all since my time on council. And, I appreciate that others, will do that as well, express their differences and their opinions and disagreements with dignity and respect. But I do want to say that, we as council members are elected by our constituents, and they are the citizens of Charleston. We serve and work for the taxpayers, and we are the taxpayers' voice. We are their voices. The people in my district choose if I'm doing well enough to, retain my position, be reelected. And I believe that the First Amendment allows us to speak for our constituents and let their voices be heard. And I think that puts the power in the hands of the constituents, and it's the way it should be. And gosh, we've been a city since 1670. We just realized, our 350th anniversary, and spoke a lot about that. We haven't needed this for over 350 years. I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know that we need it now. And I think it's a very dangerous path that we're going down with this. What I read in the proposed ordinance, I think steps all over the right to speech, the First Amendment, and therefore the rights of the people that we represent, that we're supposed to be speaking for. I believe we've got an ethics commission that, that we can report to, that we do report to. We've got a governor who can remove any of us if we do something that warrants it. We're supposed to run our meetings by Robert's Rule of Order. We've got a strong mayor form of government. Our mayor can remove anybody he wants to, or can appoint or remove anybody from any committee that he would like. So I don't understand the reason why we need to do this after 350 years, starting our 352nd year, I guess. And there's some things in here just as examples. I mean, I could go all day, I think, on why I think this is why it steps all over our First Amendment rights. But one of them that sticks out to me real quickly is That number 6, decisions based on merit. Members shall base their decision on the merits and substance of the matter at hand rather than unrelated considerations. Listen, we got a right to vote yes or no. And I don't think I have to explain that to anybody on council. According to this, I do. Now, if I need to, I need to go back and maybe explain to my constituents, because that's who I'm representing and why I voted on their behalf a certain way. But who's to tell me based on merit that I shouldn't have voted the way I should have voted? That one just really jumps out at me on here. Another one, when presenting.
Hey, Kevin, you might be looking at the old version of this ordinance. There's been a more recent one that Chip sent forward that's a lot simpler. I'm not sure that it would change your comments, and I was about to chime in and agree with you, but I do think there's a different version of this that we're going to consider.
Maybe I don't have the last one then.
Am I right about that, Chip? He's looking at the old one, right?
Yeah.
I prepared one for city council's consideration, and I think it was decided that the committee be created. And then I did sort of a reduced version that's really a lot more general. It's I can pull it up real quick just to show everybody.
Do we maybe want to screen share that, Chip?
Sure.
Make sure we're all working off the same version. And I apologize about that, Kevin, if you're,
okay.
I mean, again, to Mike's point, it may not change anything you've said, and that's okay. And that's okay too.
Yeah. And it's, to give you background there, city council does have some statutory rights to remove members, under, I think, 3 set circumstances under state law, but it requires a trial type hearing. I did a lot of research on this when we had a member who, I don't know, allegedly or did move out of his district 2 or 3 years ago. And there's a process. If you fail to qualify for your position at any point during your term, city council can sort of hold a trial type hearing and remove you from office. And we didn't do that in that circumstance, but there is that state law. There's also Robert's Rules, which has its own sort of disciplinary section, but it's really more, the presiding officer calling the person down at the meeting when that person does something that's out of line or what have you. That in a worst case scenario, Robert's Rules allows you to censure or remove an office, which obviously wouldn't apply under state law. We couldn't use Robert's Rules to remove someone from office. But, under Robert's Rules, you could censure, or you could, at the meeting discipline something. But if you're going to censure based on, it distinguishes between, and a lot of things will, between conduct that happens at a meeting and conduct that's outside of a meeting. And if it's outside of a meeting, Robert's Rules would say you have to have a trial. You have to call witnesses who observe the conduct. You got to prove the conduct to council before they can even censure you. This is really just a 30,000 foot view, almost like, almost like a, well, it is, do not, bring embarrassment on the city. The code of conduct is literally section A. So you got to maintain decorum and don't bring disgrace or embarrassment upon the city. What would happen if somebody is accused of violating that? If another council member, accused them of doing that, first action taken would be to refer it to the mayor, or if it's the mayor that's being called down, to the mayor pro tem. And this is standard language that I've seen throughout codes of conducts. And the mayor or mayor pro tem would basically have a private conversation or recommend sanctions or form a committee to investigate. And then if there are repeated violations or there's serious infractions of the code, city council or in the inaction of the pro tem or the mayor, city council could take action of censuring or removing from committees or that type of thing. And that's, I mean, that's pretty much the ordinance. Everything else is sort of says that other provisions of the code aren't affected. So, that's pretty much the heart of it. So whether or not it adds, I don't know how much it does other than call out something where Robert's rule, you'd have to go to Robert's rules to do it in the first place. Cause there is a lot of that, no disorderly conduct, everyone has the right to speak, that kind of stuff in Robert's rules.
I mean, I don't know. I think we have things that's been in place for 350 years, and I don't see this improving our situation. If anything, I think it could cause more issues, and we've got a lot of things to consider in city council right now between public safety and flooding and how our city's being built and everything else that I don't know. To me, we've got a lot more important issues in this code of conduct right now, and I'm just afraid it steps on First Amendment rights. So.
I agree with that. I just think one of the problems with this, and it's of no reflection to anyone who drafted it, is it's just, how do you define embarrassment? What if I decided that, in order to get people to stop cutting off the top of palm trees, I got dressed up as a palm tree and brought a chainsaw with me and, started jumping up and down? It'd probably be embarrassing to a lot of people, including myself. I just think, Chip, in your soliloquy about this, you sort of pointed out that we have the tools we need and are available to do the things we do. I don't remember, and it's amazing because it's only short term, what prompted this action and why we're doing this, but whatever it is, we haven't needed it since. And I think the enemy of good is better, and I'm just not a fan of trying to put things like this in writing. And plus, Mayor, I know you're on this call. I can't see you because they're off my screen, but what this does is it sends the offender to the principal's office. In this instance, it's the mayor's office, and he's got a lot on his plate. Does he really want to deal with that too? I mean, I'm kind of good with where we are, and those are my comments.
And I'll do whatever you all tell me to do. I don't really have a position one way or another, detailed, not detailed, or nothing.
Chip, do you remember why we are doing this in the first place? What prompted this?
Yeah, the comments about that group meeting that one of the council members almost attended. I think that sort of led to a conversation in December. And then I think we ended up, a number of people had called for drafting a code of conduct to sort of address something, maybe not that, but something that arises in the future. And, I said I would draft it if people wanted me to, and I did that. And then this is where we are. So.
Thank you. I now remember that.
Yeah.
You have refreshed my recollection.
And Councilmember Appel, I think if you press *6 on your phone, you'll probably need to speak using your phone. You're connected by your phone.
Can y'all hear me?
We
Now
can.
Yep.
Wow. All these Zoom meetings for the past year, this is the first time I've had a problem, but here we are. Listen, I totally get the argument that there's 100 things more important to the lives of our constituents that we can be doing and are doing. So I'm not like hair on fire saying we need to get a code of conduct or the world's going to stop spinning. So I mean, with that all being said, to put the other the other side of this argument is that when we do have rare situations occur that rightfully cause the community to ask some very serious questions, there's an expectation that the city will act in a manner to police itself. And there's precedent for this. Congress does this. The General Assembly does this. Lawyers do this. Lawyers have rules that govern themselves. We as a body, one could argue, have a responsibility to police ourselves, hold ourselves to a standard, and because I mean, as y'all seen through the community and its response to certain instances that have taken place, there was an expectation that the city of Charleston would take action on this, and maybe we should have, maybe we shouldn't have, but this provides a mechanism for doing it. And some very smart people that framed our Constitution put a process into play for this. This is the precedent. I mean, this would be the analogous approach at the local level here. So, but listen, I totally get it. We don't need to be consuming our time, with this every, second of every meeting. We got a lot of stuff to do. We've already got jammed up agendas and meetings that go into the late hours of the night. But I mean, I can see the point of having a mechanism in place for handling these issues that hopefully are rare, that come up from time to time. And I think that the public, I think would, is maybe shocked that we don't already have something like this in place. So I definitely agree that, we didn't need the more complicated 8-page idea, although Chip, I thought it was very well drafted. I like this skinny approach. I think that it would be a good idea to look at some super majority requirements if we're going to do it. So it's not something, 7 people get together and decide they want to do something. It needs to be used for rare occasions. Again, there's precedent for that. That's what we just saw in DC recently. It takes a lot. It takes a lot to actually, make it happen. But I mean, I'll speak personally. I think the city should have, issued a statement back in December with some of the stuff that happened, and not just the outward projection of the event, but also some of the stuff that was directed towards us by us. That's as a body, I think we have to hold ourselves to certain decorum and certain minimum standards of decency. And if we don't police that, if we don't take a stand on that, the community is right to question what we're about and what we stand for. So again, I'm not obsessed about this and thinking about this at every minute and every moment, but just wanted to provide the perspective sort of from the other side there.
Well, and I think I appreciate something that it can't just be, I don't like a council member and I'm going to send him or her to the mayor, and you wind up with all this infighting and things like that. So I do like Ross's point of a super majority or something, that it doesn't just become all of this back and forth, or any little thing you do that rubs me the wrong way, I'm gonna jump to this. I agree with what Kevin's saying. We've been around for a long time. But I don't know if anybody happens to know if a council member has ever had to be removed, or a mayor has ever had to be removed because of something they did or said. I guess, and I think all of us on this call are thinking about those extreme circumstances. And in that, does the city need to have its own plan in place, or because of the ethics and the state, is that wrapped into that? Is this effort duplicative? And I'm asking because I don't know.
It could be duplicative. I think from an ethical standpoint, there's probably a big part of a preemption argument because of the ethics laws are, A, B, C, D. They're lined up, and the State Ethics Commission has jurisdiction over that. So, I really think this is really more of it goes beyond ethics to actual conduct. And I understand what Councilmember Shealy's saying. I don't think he's necessarily wrong. And I definitely think a super majority is the way to go, really based on his comments, which is, it does make you think about how much time. As a member of staff, I'll tell you, my least favorite thing to do is deal with this kind of stuff. Not that it doesn't deserve to be dealt with, but nobody gets into public service to throw mud, or even if it needs to be thrown. I mean, that's just not something I want to spend my time on. That, is the most frustrating, I think, aspect of working for local government, is you really don't have control over that. But, it goes a little bit beyond ethics, but, whether or not it's necessary, it's a fine line. And I agree with the whole people are entitled to their opinions. I have a hard time with that as well, because they're, I think I wouldn't mind amending the Constitution to make some exceptions to that, but there aren't a lot of exceptions to that.
Well, and I think what's
Make
tough,
an exception.
I'm joking. I'm talking tongue in cheek. I'm not really advocating to amend the Constitution.
and I certainly see
Unless it's for
how-
the ERA.
I certainly see how times have changed, and we're in a 24-hour news cycle and social media and everything else, and things get out of hand and escalate really quickly. And so I understand the intent behind this, and that's why I asked, when the rubber hits the road and we really do need to do something, do we already have those mechanisms in place? Or does this give us a little bit more? My biggest fear is it just becomes something where that just leads to infighting and creates more problems than it solves. And as Mike said, I'm going to send you to the principal's office. And so I think that's what we need to figure out, and how we feel about that.
I would say, in addition to what the state law prohibits, I always try to remind people of this. You can absolutely attack or challenge or condemn general conduct or viewpoints. The government has an absolute right to speak. I mean, there's nothing wrong with saying the government does not like white supremacy. Absolutely. Or I wouldn't work for this government, but the opposite. The government can speak, on its own, and it's a lot of times it's better to condemn that than it is to actually call people specifically out. And it goes a lot further from my viewpoint. But I think the extra little bit it would give you above state law is exactly, the type of thing that you would want to condemn, the action itself without necessarily attacking the person if you can. That being said, I don't run for elected office, so that, there are important parts to that aspect as well. I do understand that.
So can I, Mr. Chairman, or Madam Chair, who's conducting here?
Please go ahead. We're all conducting here.
So I would concur that if some reprimand or censure was to come before council, that a supermajority, maybe even a super majority, would be appropriate. I do would ask us to think about and clarify. I see the sentence here. It says, if no action is taken by the mayor or mayor pro tem, the alleged violation may be raised to council in a public meeting. And is that by one council member just raising their hand? Is that maybe if that were to occur? So back to Councilmember Seeking's example, if he were to jump up and down on a palmetto stalk, and I may not think that's an embarrassment, and somebody else does, so report it to the mayor, and I'm going to say, Mike, that's okay. I agree with you. We shouldn't have cut, we blah blah blah. So, but somebody might disagree with my judgment that such thing was an embarrassment. So does that just take one member of council to pipe up, or should we have some requirement that it takes two or three? I just raised that issue and question. And then I must just raise from my own experience of a few years ago, what happened with the accusations against me about expenditure for the business cards for my wife. And we ended up going down this trail with the audit committee and the internal auditor doing an inordinate amount of time and effort investigating all of that and some other things. And, and then towards the end, everybody was feeling so sorry for the internal auditor that we had put him in this position. So it turned out, I think everybody agreed, very awkward at the end. And so I'm reminded of that myself as y'all have made these comments, kind of talking about both sides of this equation, that, what we had, in my view, didn't work that well. And I think there was somewhat agreement about that amongst a lot of members of council about how the audit committee came into play and the role of the internal auditor and all like that. So in fact, for rare occasions, hopefully never, but rare occasions where some question occurs, maybe something like this is appropriate, I would say. But again, I would have a super or super majority, and then also address that if the mayor or the mayor pro tem, in their judgment, didn't think a violation occurred, at what bar does council still, raise it to council in a public meeting?
And Councilwoman Jackson has her hand up.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for letting me be part of this. It sounds like it's sort of a decision-making wrap-up meeting. I guess, and I hadn't seen the abbreviated version, so I do probably have questions about the two words that we are agreeing to under our code of conduct, the decorum and embarrassment. So maybe that, those words need to be more specifically defined. But the way I thought about this as the council was talking about it, and then looking at the document that Chip did give us, for me, it's the inverse. This is a code of honor that we're basically volunteering, to agree to, that we're going to hold ourselves accountable. And in the very worst case, when we don't, then we have a way of censuring or asking to remove one of our colleagues who's done something, pretty egregious. After the incident on December 5th, there were several of us who thought that it would be very appropriate to issue a statement that we would join in and stand against the actions of our colleague. And then we found out from our corporate counsel and looking into the law that we really didn't have the basis for any sort of agreement on an action that we disagreed with, or we didn't have a way to disagree officially because we didn't have some sort of conduct code to evaluate that by. And without that, it would have been, just we would be on thin ice on what we were actually standing up against. So that's where I thought we came to the code of conduct idea, to make it an honor code that we would use to self-police. And in the worst case, which would be rare, and I agree it should be a supermajority, then we would have something to base a censure or a statement about the conduct for a colleague that didn't honor his code. That's the way I look.
So is the sense that we amend this proposed ordinance to include language around a supermajority, and then if how many council members it takes, or what needs to happen if, you know, in Mayor's example, he says, I don't see anything wrong with what you did, but another council member does, to then bring it before a council meeting for a public hearing. Is the consensus that we want to add in more language around that and bring this to council and let the votes fall as they may? Or how do we want to take today and move forward? What's the feeling?
And I was going to make the suggestion, if you feel like y'all would like to meet again, I mean, I wasn't sure what time schedule y'all were on. I mean, it doesn't have to go on this agenda. If y'all would like to meet some more to discuss, I mean, that's up to the committee as to what y'all would like to do.
So I mean, I think that's what I would like to hear from others is, where do you want to go from here? What do you want to do with this now?
I'm not sure we're going to reach a consensus on that.
So do we want to meet one more time? Do we want to bring forth what we have? Would it need to be brought forth as a first reading? Would it come through as a council communication? Or, I mean, do we decide in here if it lives or dies, or does that need to come before the full council? You know, again, I'm just asking, what are our options, and what do we want to do from here?
And Chip, you may want to chime in as well, but I think it would just, when y'all have come to a decision as to how you would like to handle it, it would go to city council for a first reading. And Chip, is that?
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to get my thing back. I somehow closed it, but
You got it.
yeah, I think so. If the committee wanted to make a vote, you know, either to recommend that there not be a new code of ethics adopted, or an as amended version, and I put up on the screen one that would require 3 council members and then a 3/4 supermajority vote. And I highlighted the portion, but you know, or so you could recommend an amended version, or you could meet later, or you could just say we don't think we need anything. If that's the recommendation, I think you report it out to council. If it's we don't need anything, I think it's just a committee report, and council can act accordingly. They can send it back and say, no, we need something, or however they want to act. If the committee wants to recommend approval of an amended ordinance, then it could go for first reading on the 23rd or later. And if the committee wants to vote to delay and have another meeting, then we would just move it to a different agenda and address those things later. I think the only thing, if we have another meeting, I think the only question I would have is, what else do you want me to do before that next meeting? Or is it just sort of it may just be people that need to think about it and come back and discuss it. But if it's just sort of an impasse of, 3-2 or 2-3 or 2-1-2, it may be better to just vote now. I don't, it's up to you all.
Well, unless there's something, like I said, people need to think about it more than they already have, or something new is going to come to light. The last thing any of us need is another meeting on our calendar, and I want to be respectful of people's time and talents. So if we go to what prompted this all, to Councilmember Jackson's point, would this have allowed a different option? Would this have allowed someone to make a statement? Would this have put any more, cards on the table, or, given us more tools to work with? Again, I'm just trying to figure out, does this give us more than we already have? Is
I don't know
this
how much
actually going to help us get to where we're looking to go? Or, not to sound really insensitive, or is this just something we're going to do to make us feel better about ourselves, that we have this, and so it makes us feel good that we did this? Which that doesn't feel good either. I want to do something because it actually has the potential to generate the result that we're looking for.
In speaking personally, I think it would give us a reason and a process to follow. So, and can I just add, I think I feel pretty strongly. I know that it was a majority. I thought it was a pretty large majority of the council who agreed to ask our legal counsel to draft a code, and then the mayor appointed y'all to lead this task force to look at the details of what a code would be. But I don't think any of us expected that you would just come back and say, well, no, we don't need a code. I do feel like the council is asking for a draft of a document. Whether we adopt it or not would be up to the full council. But I do think it should be their opportunity to make that decision. You're coming back with a draft, and maybe you can't recommend the draft. But I do feel like the council itself needs to have the ability to act on whether we adopt something or not.
Which is what I lean toward. I don't like the idea of I just, come back and my report is it died in committee kind of thing. When it's not like this was a standing committee and this was something that came to our committee. This was a committee formed specifically for this purpose at the will of council. So if something happens or doesn't happen, I think it needs to be at the will of council. I just kind of like to have a sense of where people are, and and Chip, if to my prior question, when we look at what has prompted all of this, does this make anything different?
I think it solidifies the process. I think without this, you have to go to Robert's rules, and there's, in addition to creating law, the reason to put something in a code as opposed to incorporating it by reference from I don't know how many page Robert's rules book, is so that people are aware of it. Because I don't think anybody's aware of the disciplinary process in Robert's rules. And this isn't that, it's a little bit different. And I think it's a better process, especially if you sort of require more than one council member to raise the issue, so that you don't end up with one council member, raising a censure motion every meeting. And if you put in a supermajority vote requirement, so you don't have, just some weird political thing happening for, reasons that really aren't as important as things we've addressed in the past. I think those would be the two things that's what would give us over and above Robert's rules. I still think when you're talking about conduct that's outside a council meeting, your due process is going to require more of a trial type hearing. So I still think you'd have to, as far as it being before city council, you'd have to give notice of the violation, and you'd have to, it's a difficult process. I think people think it's overkill, but that's just what's required. And that's in Robert's rules, and that's in state law. If we were to remove an officer or remove somebody from office, it requires trial type hearing. Now, if it's in front of council and you all witness it anyway, this gives you the option to use. Otherwise, it just supplements Robert's rules.
Madam Chair Lady, I think just in response to procedure, I mean, I think it's not unprecedented for committees to take up matters that are referred back to committee by reference and consider them and take a vote and then report back out to council. If this committee votes that we have the tools in place to do what we need to do and we don't need anything more, council can reverse that. I mean, it doesn't take a super majority, it's just 7 people. So I think procedurally, this committee can vote to do whatever it decides to vote to do. It won't kill it. It'll just come out as a report on how we voted on what was put before us. And if we're going to vote on what's before us now, we should vote on that. If not, we want to have Chip work on it a little bit more, that'd be fine too. I will tell you, in addition to the comments Kevin made earlier, which I tend to agree with, I think you've really got some issues with putting forward a code of conduct that relies on the words disgrace and embarrassment. I just don't know how you ever define those in any legal forum or any legal form. And look, I will tell you one thing. I don't think there's anybody sitting here right now. We're all very responsible members of council, and some of us have been through some tough proceedings on this, who want to have to sit there and defend something that's embarrassing or disgraceful. I mean, try not to do that and, you know, go back to the voters. It's just, it puts people in a really tough position that there's no real backdrop or defining standard by which it can be judged. So I worry procedurally whether we need it, and I certainly don't think that the manner in which it's drafted with those requirements and those limitations of disgrace and embarrassment, we can really move forward with anything that's meaningful and doesn't just send us down a rabbit hole that we'll never recover from. So, you know,
Yeah.
This is a committee that was put together. We can vote, and Councilmember Jackson, if we just report out what the vote is and council can take it up.
So there's no document to take up. I mean,
well, I'm just saying we can do anything. We can vote on whether we need something, or we can vote on this document that's right before us right now that Mr. McQueenie has worked on and amended, or we can ask him to go back to the drawing board again. I mean, I think all those are tools.
You're saying you mean the full council will have
no,
this
the
document?
committee, this committee. And then we can put it through to council. And if council then wants to take up something different, they have every right to do it.
They don't know what it.
We do that all the time.
And you may be able to report it out without recommendation too. Just report the document out. This is the document prepared. These are the changes we made, but we don't have a recommendation. It's just for discussion purposes for council, or we recommend council discuss it. That may be the, I think everybody knows whatever recommendation comes out is going to be, I would think, vigorously discussed for council. Maybe I'm wrong, but.
So could I ask a question, Chip, or my colleagues here? Is there any language that you feel would be more objective than disgrace and embarrassment? And I'll be the first to admit that just with everything we've seen in the last year or two going on in the country and the world, that the definition of embarrassment is, I don't know, just thinking about that blows my mind a little bit.
A lot.
What I used to think, was a real embarrassment has become generally accepted to be okay. So, I get that point, and but is there some better way to skin that cat?
So if I may, there isn't a better way to skin that cat. And I think that James Madison had it right in 1787 with the Constitution, high crimes and misdemeanors. What does that mean? It means whatever Congress says it means, right? As a body, we have the inherent authority to police and regulate ourselves. I don't think there's any First Amendment issues implicated with any of this. I think it's well established legally that governing bodies can police themselves. The United States Constitution has a mechanism in place for this. The South Carolina Constitution has a mechanism in place to do this. This is well within the norms of American law and American common law. So I'm not worried about the legal issues whatsoever, and that's why they didn't define. I don't even look at this as a code of conduct. This is a procedural ordinance, in my view. It's not like a code of conduct saying thou shalt do, 20 different things, and you can point to things and say you didn't do this, you didn't do that. This is just a mechanism. It's a procedural mechanism to deal with situations as they come up from time to time. I mean, the framers of the Constitution recognized there would be instances in history where it would be called upon for Congress to police itself and to police the executive and to do that, because otherwise the risk is, the downside to all this is that if we don't do anything, the public at some point loses trust in the ability for us to function and the ability for us to stand behind what we do. So I think we'll never get this thing out of committee if we try and script out the sort of conduct that falls within it, that doesn't fall within it. It's up to the judgment of the supermajority. And that was good enough for James Madison. It was good enough for whoever drafted the South Carolina Constitution, the latest version that I'm looking at right now. And I have a hard time being able to explain, well, the federal government does it, the state government does it, but we don't have a mechanism like this in the city of Charleston. That doesn't make sense to me. But at the same time, I agree with y'all. The last thing I would ever want to do during my time on city council is spend time messing any of this stuff. This is not like, like what we want to be doing or dealing with. But when events and situations come across our table that fall through the cracks of the statutory framework in place, like you kill somebody, you're getting thrown out of office. Governor McMaster's coming in and pulling you out of office. You steal, you do something with money, you're out. But beyond that, there's a gap here. There's a gap here that needs to be filled, in my opinion. That's the role that impeachment performs at the federal and state level. These aren't crimes. This isn't a crime. It's a political process that members of a political body get to administer according to their own decisions and judgments. Those are pretty smart guys that drafted the Constitution. They thought real long and hard about this, and they decided to put this in the way they put it in. And it's been a sparingly used power over the years, given a lot of drama going back to the founding. And I just think that without it, we're not properly protecting the institution that we are part of. That's the reason it exists at the federal and state level. And we need to be able to call things out when it deserves to be called out. I agree. I mean, we don't need to bring it up and talk about it, but it should have been called out as a council in December. I think we missed an opportunity to do that. And the public was right to, ask questions about, well, why weren't we doing anything? Why weren't we taking a stand as a city in regards to some of this conduct? So, I mean, let's get away from the idea that this is some like unprecedented departure. This is what we're doing right now is unprecedented in the norm of, federal and state government that we operate under. And I'll just also add, I've used the word impeachment, but as I read this ordinance, we're not talking about, convicting someone and getting them thrown out of office. We're talking about a process to formalize a censure, right? Or take someone off of a committee or something. So, I mean, it's the teeth to this is not even that extreme. It's just the ability for us as a city to act and police our own ranks, which again, I think is well within the norms of the law.
All right.
Rather than, I don't know what to call it, disgrace and embarrassment, or the two words at the beginning. If it becomes, we tie this to the oath of office we all took. If we tie it to that, and if you're found to be or believed to be in violation of your oath of office, is that better? Or are we still, or does that still feel the same? Is that hard to define? I'm just trying to think of something that already exists, that we are upheld to hold our oath of office. And so if you feel I have violated my oath, I feel this then gives you a channel to carry me through, believing that I've violated my oath, as opposed to I've done something you thought was embarrassing.
Chip, would it, for the second sentence in section A, is that something that could just come out? And then maybe amend that to represents the city in accordance with the oath of office?
Yeah, I could do that. You mean change the first sentence to oath of office?
And then the
Member
second,
shall maintain. Yeah, I really just need to find the oath of office and sort of restate it as a.
I happen to have mine.
There you go.
You're
I was
sitting
looking
behind
under
you.
the.
Nice work. Maybe we should just make everybody put that on their desk and have it in front of them at all times when conducting city business.
Yeah. I just, to me, again, I mean, I feel more comfortable. What I feel most comfortable with is we report out that we discussed this. Here are some amendments we made, and 13 people vote as they want for first reading. And discussion happens like it does with any other ordinances being brought up for first reading. And we let the chips fall as they may, is my feeling.
Is that a motion?
I'll make that a motion. Are you gonna make me repeat that?
No.
I don't really remember everything I said.
No, I
Before we do that, what's the thought on changing disgrace and embarrassment to upholding your oath of office?
And
That's a
adding
good idea.
the majority and adding the 3 council members.
Yeah. Okay, so based on those changes, that's the motion I would make.
so the motion is
I'll
to
second it.
report the proposed bill out to city council as amended.
Correct.
For their consideration.
So would that be an official first reading then, item?
That's what I'm proposing, is that it comes
Okay.
under first reading, and you would discuss it and vote on it like we would anything else brought up for first reading.
Thank you. I would agree with.
I'm going to put a member shall act in accordance with the member's oath of office in representing the city in A. Is that
Mhm.
good enough?
Yeah.
And then in D, I'll put if no action is taken by, sorry for the noise. Sorry.
Nice.
If no action is taken by the mayor or mayor pro tem, any 3 council members may raise the alleged violations to council in a public meeting. After hearing, council may, by vote of 3/4 of those members present voting, reprimand, etc. And everything else will read the same.
Mhm.
Is that
Yep.
Good with everyone? Well, all right. So the motion's made. I guess you need a second and then discussion and vote.
There's a second. Councilmember Appel seconded the motion.
So
Is there
all
any-
of those in favor?
Aye.
And opposed?
Nay.
Okay,
And who are the ayes?
This is myself, Ross, and Mayor.
Okay. The motion passes 3-2.
And the motion doesn't recommend the ordinance for approval. It just brings it to council for its consideration.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'll send that to you, Jennifer, in a few minutes.
Is that on this coming agenda,
Yes.
Jennifer? You're on mute.
I think that was the idea. The ad hoc committee was trying to meet to place it on this agenda.
Okay.
hey Chip, when you send it out, you probably ought to attach the oath of office, because other than Councilmember Del Chapo, I doubt any of us
I
have
was
it
just
sitting
looking
on
at
our
the
desk right
ordinance. I
now.
know it's out there, but I didn't know.
I don't.
Probably an oath or affirmation of office, but I'll put the proper language in there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll take a picture. of it.
Kudos. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Sounds good.
All right.
Mr. Knight?
Anything else?
Thank you all.
All right. Thanks, y'all. I appreciate it.